minds of the European region. They felt like, yeah, we're the strongest. You guys can fight for second place. And I think players like fr0zen have been working really hard to put themselves on the map as well as their entire country. Taking a look at their road to get here. You've seen fr0zen, he had to handle a couple of rocky paths to get to this point. He definitely messed up a little bit, even though he won his first series, and then he lost to ShtanUdachi earlier in the tournament. Is that an indication of what might happen here, Brian?
It's definitely a sign of something going on there. Whether it was fr0zen's performance earlier, sort of reshaping up and getting stronger as the tournament went on. As you mentioned, he was a little bit shaky in that first match and was able to power through his opponents later on very confidently. Looking at the matchup here, the big thing to notice here is that fr0zen is playing the most unique lineup in this entire event. He does not have a warrior, which is considered by many the strongest class, the strongest deck being Pirate Warrior. We see he has chosen to ban the deck from ShtanUdachi. ShtanUdachi, he's generally known to be a player who brings unusual decks of his own creation, but he's playing a fairly standard lineup. One big thing to note, he's not playing Priest. Priest has been the worst performing deck in this entire field so far. Even if you discount the Reno Priest performance by B787, it is still the worst performing deck, and that is a deck in fr0zen's lineup that could be weak here.
Yeah, that wasn't the case in the previous series. fr0zen lost 1-4 primarily because his Druid and Rogue struggled to get wins. The Dragon Priest actually got the win. But at the same time, we know what their strategies are trying to target, which is very similar. Both players kind of want to corner their opponent's Reno Warlock decks. Who's going to come out ahead? Now, we do know ShtanUdachi. He's one of the most hyped players from Europe for the past year and a half. He's been, really on the cutting edge of innovating a lot of decks, and he's felt like he didn't really have too much room for complete innovation, but he still has his own flair on stuff. We've seen it impact series multiple times this tournament, and we'll see if it happens now. We're going to start off with Miracle Rogue Mirrors, but they're not exactly the same kind of list, Brian.
No, they're not. ShtanUdachi includes the Pirate package. We see the Swashbuckler in his hand. He has a copy of Patches the Pirate, we're going to see flying out of a cannon right now. This is something that allows him to get on the board earlier in the game and get damage going. However, fr0zen has more of the sort of combo tools in his list. He is much more heavily devoted to just being able to kind of go off with Auctioneer. ShtanUdachi, in fact, does not even have Leroy Jenkins, which is a card that's been a highlight of these combo versions of Rogue for a very long time. His only burst potential as far as charge minions are concerned is that Patches as well as a single copy of South Sea Deckhand. So his damage from hand capability is lower than fr0zen's.
And fr0zen does have some of those other weird inclusions, such as Barnes. It's not necessarily weird as if that's the first time we've seen it, but it is unusual in the sense that people have largely gravitated away from Barnes, especially because of the Pirate package. That's why fr0zen took it out. He's not playing Patches. Instead, he's playing Deadly Poison and has completely skimped out on Swashbucklers.
You mentioned that both these players are generally aiming to try to defeat their opponent's Reno Warlock deck. That's been a very popular and, in fact, very successful deck in this tournament. And each of these players designed their decks in such a way that that was something they're trying to corner from their opponents. And the exclusion of the Pirate package is relatively strong in that matchup because you do want to have the more of the big, powerful turns. But is this going to be a powerful Barnes? Tomb Pillager is an excellent result from Barnes for fr0zen because even though it's only a 1-1, when it dies, it will provide him with a coin, and that will fuel the Gadgets and Auctioneer in his hand.
Yeah, if he can get to that point, though, one of the things that we've seen a lot with Rogue versus Rogue is how fast the game can end. Stan does have preps. He has Ban Cleaves available to him, so if he wants to just push tempo, yeah, you can have a turn where you have Auctioneer concealed and full mana, but you start the turn at 12 health.
Yeah, and very often the player who gets on the board and is able to continue supporting their pressure with things like Sap and Eviscerate is able to continue to press that advantage unless there is a huge swing turn involving Preparation and Auctioneer and such. Edwin Van Cleef from fr0zen is answered by the 2 copies of Tomb Pillager from ShtanUdachi, but fr0zen has the ability to help start clearing off this board this turn if he chooses.
Yeah, but if you clear, you're not really pushing anything behind it. I think fr0zen, with that Leroy pickup, might be looking for a way to get aggressive somehow if you can start counting damage. If you Leroy and conceal, you have 10, 11 damage this turn, but do you have the difference maker guaranteed? What if your opponent Fan of Knives with Thanos?
Yeah, it's true. The ability for fr0zen to set up a possible 2-turn lethal is available. He can go for it here, and that's what he's doing. He's going to push, like you mentioned, 10 damage to the face, coin, conceal. Now, unless ShtanUdachi is able to remove those concealed minions, there's the follow-up of Eviscerating Cold Blood in fr0zen's hand.
ShtanUdachi also can get perhaps a second copy of Fan of Knives to get through it.
Yep.
He needs some way to get past that Leroy Jenkins.
And I think it's exactly Fan of Knives or Kill You. I think that's the only available out ShtanUdachi has.
He's got 13.
12, 13 on board himself. He'd need to find another 14 damage here. He doesn't have Leroy, we mentioned, not even in his deck.
Yeah, and the Assassinate can't target anything, so that Splashbroker spell is useless.
Second Fan of Knives is his out here. That's not it.
Oh, what an unfortunate order of things. If he was able to get the Azure Drake and then combine that with the Fan of Knives, that would have answered it. Instead, Stan might have to just go with his own conceal play and hope his opponent is just praying for damage.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. He is loading up his board with Edwin Van Cleef, his own conceal. But he's going to get the bad news very soon that fr0zen has the damage to finish him off.
Looks like fr0zen's on point. ShtanUdachi goes for a counter push, but just one turn too slow. And that is one of the advantages of going first in this matchup. You can usually squeeze out these all-in plays just at the nick of time. And fr0zen's going to wrap up game one with a 1-0 lead.
And that's a blistering start to the matchup. We mentioned that these rogue games can be absolutely volatile. This is turn 6. He's attacking for more than lethal damage.
fr0zen getting on the board here, representing USA again, and that's 5 wins in a row for fr0zen if you count back the previous series. He's got the momentum.
Yeah.
It can halt any time, but in terms of your confidence level, you have to be feeling like you're on point.
Yeah, fr0zen is someone who started out this tournament very rocky. His performance in his match against B787 was something that he said he was ashamed of. He said that he felt bad for his fans watching that, and he wanted to prove that he was better than that. And his dismantling of Dokpone in their semifinal match was just remarkable.
Yep, even professionals get nervous, Brian. And after his day one meltdown, fr0zen has learned an important lesson. When you make a mistake, you gotta stay cool.
The pressure's getting to fr0zen. fr0zen there, definitely looking kind of nervous.
The first few matches were really bad, nerves-wise.
A clash of East versus the West.
During my match versus B787, I made a mistake that I don't think I've ever made.
We're gonna go to Mage versus the Druid. You might be able to piece it together. It's actually really tricky.
I could kill him now with the rope burning. There's a chance I don't make it before the rope burns.
Was that fast enough? Did he get it all off?
Oh!
Or I could just take the guaranteed win the next turn because I have lethal.
Oh no!
When you miscount and you're 1 damage off lethal, it is huge.
And I made the wrong choice there.
This was a crucial turn that fr0zen fumbled here.
Ooh, he is crushed.
What affected me there was the nerves.
Just look at fr0zen's face. He's very clearly shaken by what transpired.
Really frustrates myself because I know I was better than that.
Coming up next, Nyria versus fr0zen.
The stakes be able to go to the World Championship.
The match versus Nyria, things went wrong earlier on,
Nyria has cleaned this one up.
I messed it up last time. Can I get it right this time?
but I made sure to not get mad at myself and tried my best to forget about it.
fr0zen is going to take a win.
It's fr0zen that's been clawing back.
I was still able to slow down, think about my turns, think about my plays. I was able to pull out a win.
fr0zen, ladies and gentlemen, has done it, coming back from a huge deficit.
Being rewarded here is just the best feeling ever.
Qualifier for the World Championship from North America.
I really want to win this tournament and take it for NA.
fr0zen's got to be cool, like his moniker. You can't be ice cold and fr0zen, but yet choking on the big stage. And it seems like he's had a big turnaround since the first series of this tournament. And maybe it's because of his friends, maybe because his family is here supporting him. You see that his father and mother still watching alongside. And it looks like they're in great spirits. They were saying a few days ago that they couldn't even watch fr0zen play anymore. It was too nerve-wracking.
They were a little bit nervous to watch him live, but they realized, all right, we're here to support fr0zen. We're here to support our son, and they're going to hopefully inspire some confidence in him.
In the meantime, ShtanUdachi, a player that has also been generating a lot of discussion, especially within the Russian community. When he started streaming, several months ago or however long ago, he started getting a lot of popularity. People turned to him for answers to the metagame. He is the sage of the Eastern European community. He's often the one bringing different deck lists, defying the odds, saying this is how you build Rogue, this is how you're building these control decks. And he's often the one being relied upon by the Europeans for direction in the game.
Well, we'll see if his way of building Rogue will pay off in this matchup against fr0zen playing Dragon Priest. We mentioned that Dragon Priest overall in the tournament has had a pretty poor result. but it was the one deck that fr0zen managed to win with in their last match. So I wonder if that's affecting fr0zen's confidence going into this match at all.
Well, at worst, he already did just as good as he did the previous
It's true, he got one win.
And Dragon Priest, we mentioned how it's just been subpar, and you know, much hasn't changed since today. The statistics are under 40% win rate, and that just is an abysmal performance for what is one of the most popular decks showed up in representation.
I think a lot of it was that people predicted that Dragon Priest would be a very popular deck and decided to play things like Freeze Mage that are much more solid against Dragon Priest than Reno Mage, for instance. Though Reno Mage is in Stan's lineup. And it'll be interesting to see if that is a deck that he'll be able to get a win with in this matchup, because it can potentially struggle against some of these decks.
Yeah, not surprisingly, Reno Warlock has a high win rate. I think it's because of so many Dragon Priests being brought as well. fr0zen's a big fan of this play. Fran Bronzebeard on the board for tempo. And it's something that he's talked about a lot and something that other people don't really discuss too much these days, but maybe starts to happen a little bit more often. If Stan didn't pick up that Eviscerate, what happened this game if fr0zen was able to keep a Brand on the board? I
mean, he has a very powerful hand to utilize Brand Bronzebeard. Cabal Talon Priest in particular can give it so much health that the only answer for Stan would be Sap. And if he's using Sap on a 2-drop that has massive tempo value later in the game, that can go badly. But he is able to answer it, and now it is Draconid Operative for fr0zen. Those are some poor selections. Generally speaking, he wants to find interaction from the deck. Interestingly, he chooses to take the Tomb Pillager rather than Azure Drake. He doesn't have another dragon in his hand to enable the Twilight Guardian, so I'm somewhat surprised in that decision. Perhaps he wants to play the somewhat undercosted, overstated minion in the Tomb Pillager and have the opportunity to get the refund of the coin later on.
Yeah, this is extremely surprising to me. I was not expecting Tomb Pillager. I was expecting Azure Drake.
You literally pointed it on the screen.
Well, because he didn't have another dragon in him.
I know. I 100% with you. And Shtan here, he's going to push damage and conceal his board here. He has 10 on board, 11 with the dagger, and fr0zen without another dragon could be in some trouble.
Yeah, his Guardian doesn't have taunt.
And he just moused over it, and I think he may have just realized he doesn't have another dragon. This is actually something that happened to fr0zen before. He played his Twilight Guardian in one of his early matches without a dragon in his hand, and you could tell he didn't have the realization that it wasn't active, but he's going to push damage to face. Shtan does not have lethal yet. He has 10 on the board. Auctioneer is a strong pickup, though.
Yeah, I think while you're tempted to go for Auctioneer draws, you can also just set up another conceal play, but then you're left hoping your opponent doesn't have a follow-up taunt, or even worse. Now, what if he has Dragonfire Potion? Okay, Stan's blinking a little bit. He's saying, I don't want to get destroyed by Dragonfire Potion. I'm going to try to at least go for the Gadgetzan Clone.
Yeah, and he's able to get some damage in here. His hand is a little bit light, though. He only has the Conceal as a spell. Picks up a coin. It'll be interesting to see if he decides to use it this turn. No, he's holding off. So now fr0zen's only way to interact with this concealed board would be the Dragonfire Potion that you mentioned. There's only a single copy. And yes, still no dragon. There's no taunt available for fr0zen here.
Yeah, you know, fr0zen's trying to fight back with minion combat. And, you know, this Tomb Pillager does give Dragon Priest a lot of ability to play minions onto the board if they're given the opportunity, but now you're scared that you might die.
Now this is kind of a crossroads for Shtan here. He could play the Questing Adventurer and try and start growing that large. He could play Fan and plan to follow that up with the Edwin Van Cleef. The Fan will give him more possible draws here. Ooh, Sap is a very good one. That lines up very well with the Edwin Van Cleef, so he's able to push some damage and drop a big minion on the board. Though there is a Shadow Word Death waiting in fr0zen's hand, so he can take care of the giant fellow. I was going to say pirate. I'm like, he's not actually a pirate.
He is not.
He hangs out on a boat in Dead Mine.
He looked like he could hang out with pirates, though.
Yeah.
Very ubiquitous in that sense. fr0zen now picks up another way to guarantee a dragon. He has Nether Spy Historian, which will activate whatever he picks, the Twilight Guardian. Looks like he doesn't really have much wiggle room, though, primarily because he has Shadow Word Death the Edwin. So that's going to be follow plays later on, but at the same time, we know that ShtanUdachi doesn't have Leroy, so maybe fr0zen felt like he could play with his health a little bit, saying there's less capable burst from ShtanUdachi's deck.
Another Sap picked up by ShtanUdachi here. He does have 8 mana. He could potentially play Questing Sap if he wanted to this turn. then fr0zen would potentially be able to answer the smaller of the two questings. Just going to go ahead and go to Tomb Pillager and potentially try and get bigger questings out in a future turn. There's also just a lot of pressure on this board from these two minions that could easily trade into one of the questing adventures, and the resource of sap being gone later would mean that you don't have a way to punch through a taunt.
Yeah, and for that reason, I'm a pretty big fan of making sure that you save the sap. And fr0zen very astutely knows that even though these are really poor trades onto the board, he needs to not die and make sure this Twilight Guardian can get as much damage as possible.
And one thing that's really important to note, this is a game where Shtan has played his South Sea deckhand. His deck does not include Leroy. So he has no ability to utilize the Cold Blood Burst unless he can stick a minion on the board.
Oh, this is interesting. You know, I was thinking about the taunt minion, but of course you want to protect your questing adventure, so sapping the Tomb Pillager. fr0zen's Tomb Pillager has just not been that effective right now, just drawing back-to-back saps.
And these are two huge minions from fr0zen here, or rather from ShtanUdachi here. fr0zen needs to find a way to stop them. He needs to perhaps discover a taunt here from Netherspite Historian, or he might just be dead. That's not a taunt.
It's not a taunt, and fr0zen can draw off the Azure Drake, but that might not be enough either. Because whatever he draws, he needs a Wormnest Agent specifically off that the Azure Drake draw.
And both saps are gone for ShtanUdachi, so if he does find a taunt, he can perhaps survive another turn. But even if he does, even if he is able to absorb this hit, there's Azure Drake, and he finds another Discover effect.
And I think that's just going to be
that is going
to
be the game. Finds Chillmoth, finds the taunt, but it is too late.
That stings, but ShtanUdachi is able to strike back with his own well-played all-in. Good job there to ShtanUdachi as he's able to even up the series 1-1.
Yeah, you know, we expected a close match between these two. You know, as the other caster had mentioned in the intro here, these are two of the players who, if you were to look at this lineup and say, who do you think will make the finals? These are definitely among the top few.
Well, ShtanUdachi definitely getting an important win under his belt. And like we mentioned, has been a trusted deck builder for many months now, as he's already achieved one goal, go into the Worlds. But there's another title that he's hoping to lose today, being one of the best players in the game to never win a championship.
Deck building in Hearthstone is an art. Building something new, something I've created, and making it work in competitive play is really cool.
ShtanUdachi's brought quite an interesting lineup with a few tech choices.
There's pleasure in playing Hearthstone with pre-constructed decks and winning, but creating your own deck and winning is double the pleasure. Deck building is an art.
Game number 5 is going to go to ShtanUdachi, qualifying for the Bahamas.
For this tournament, I had to pick more or less standard decks. Because of the variations of the opponents, it's really hard to come up with something creative that would actually beat those decks. So I guess for this tournament, winning is more important than creating a new deck.
You have to completely change your strategy based on what he's doing.
I've been trying to get into this tournament for 2 years. Now that I am here, it is very important for me to win. There's obviously the prize money, but that's not the most important part. The most important is getting more followers and proving to myself that all my hard work over the past 2 years has been worthwhile.
ShtanUdachi on a path for conquest, you know, trying to see if he can mark himself in history.
Look at that stat, dude. Look at that stat.
That's arena wins?
It's arena wins. He has 11,000 arena wins. And look at this, all the players from the tournament hanging out, supporting their friends who they made over the course of the week. Dr. Chikaniki and Green Sheep at the front, clearly having some fun.
Yeah. ShtanUdachi getting more arena wins than Green Sheep got retweets for his noggin foggers.
Oh! The crowd liked that one.
Well, Shtan definitely has put in the time. He's put in the effort. You know, shout out to Green Sheep, by the way. Great performance by all European competitors, but Shtan is the only European representative remaining. And what a story that would be, again, that despite the fact that Europe started off great, had a little stumble, but in the end claims another championship on behalf of their continent and region. At that point, the debate really doesn't turn into much of an argument anymore, Brian.
Well, It does not, but this is going to be a tough one for ShtanUdachi. fr0zen with the Kun Malygos Aviana Druid. This is a powerhouse combo deck that is essentially tailored to beat a deck like Reno Lock.
That's right. It's able to withstand some pressure by just trying to remove and then draw a ton of cards, take advantage of the passivity from the slower deck, and try and kill your opponent, who also naturally wants to lower their own health by life tapping, which is also an added benefit.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Druid versus Warlock matches throughout the week. Most of those have been Druid versus, or rather Jade Druid versus Reno Lock. And the power of the removal effects in the Warlock deck are what have often swung that matchup in the Warlock's favor. It's been pretty even, I think, over the course of the week. But this matchup, those removal effects like Twisting Nether, not really what swing the match. fr0zen's not trying to build a big board and kill you. He's trying to build a board for a turn that aids in killing you that turn.
Okay, this is so interesting to me because, you know, I feel like fr0zen, what makes him so special is the fact that he looks at alternative lines all the time, and he's choosing, instead of adding more to his burst and game plan, says, I want to get something onto the board here.
Yeah, he had an option, I believe, to take a, was it a Moonfire there or another Living Roots?
Yeah.
And decided instead to take the Power of the Wild. This allows him to pressure immediately. If ShtanUdachi had not been able to answer with his Imp Gang boss, this could potentially get in a significant amount of damage over the course of a few turns. And also, he's potentially, with the Nourish in his hand, going to be drawing a bunch of stuff. So he doesn't want to hold those combo cards in his hand. He wants to be building up his mana, building up his hand as it is, so he needs to use some of those cards before that point.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you put it that way. I think that makes sense. If fr0zen was able to even get 2 turns of attacking, you get 6 damage, and guess what? Moonfire with Malygos is 6 damage. So you're able to just really pressure your opponent preemptively without having to have the Malygos. And, you know, we have seen some combo decks run into problems with hand economy. You know, sometimes you have too much cards and you can't really play Nourish. You have to dump some cards suboptimally.
My hand is too full.
Well, it might be the case for some of these players, but it's like that is one of the most important abilities or skills as players play some of these decks, is to manage your hand correctly. Speaking of, you know, managing your hand and drawing cards, the Blood Mage Thanos, very interesting tech choice for the Reno Warlock. Do you have any opinions on it now that we've seen it in action?
Well, we saw it absolutely swing a game in the match, I believe it was last night, where he was able to combine it with Hellfire to clear up a board of 4/4 minions. It has been very powerful. One of the things that I really like about ShtanUdachi's list is it feels like it is better suited to a metagame in which he is planning to ban Pirate Warrior than many other players' lists have been. For instance, he doesn't include a copy of Acidic Swamp Ooze, which we see in a lot of players' deck lists. When you're planning on banning out the Pirate Warrior deck, that card loses a lot of value. Interestingly enough, fr0zen also not playing a copy of Acidic Swamp Ooze. So I really like the fact that these are 2 players who've been very well rewarded for their understanding, not only of what decks they want to bring, but the specific card choices within those decks given the field they expect and their own ban.
Yeah, it makes sense. And they've come to 2 different strategies, which is what makes it interesting. fr0zen coming up on this turn, really trying to figure out how he want to utilize the rest of his mana. He can get even more value off Fandral. He can Wild Growth for the Crystal so he can gain something else, but he also can save it for the card draw. This is a little bit of a hard decision from fr0zen. Looks like he'd rather have the Crystal so he has more room to play with, and once again, doesn't really value too much of the card draw.
He does have Nourish in his hand, so he's going to be able to pick up quite a few more cards already. And now ShtanUdachi, he has a pretty full hand thanks to Life Tap. Being a Warlock helps in that matter, but he's going to be able to reduce a very large hand that crucially includes part of his combo. His ability to burn fr0zen out from a relatively high life total. He doesn't have the Faceless or the Leroy, but he does have Power Overwhelming and Soulfire, which can contribute to his burst damage.
Man, this is starting to get really scary for both players. ShtanUdachi has an intimidating board. He's got 11 power represented just right here. And fr0zen's just going to remove right now because he's just not feeling confident about staying alive. His opponent can keep this much.
And this is really how Shtan has to play this match. As we mentioned, fr0zen's deck is built to just kill your opponent in one fell swoop, whereas in many matchups, the Warlock is playing control. They're trying to run their opponent out of resources. They're using Life Tap to get a big hand, find answers. In this matchup, though, if the game goes really long, fr0zen assembles his combo and will just kill ShtanUdachi in a single turn. That's why this Ragnaros off the coin here is really going to cut down the time that fr0zen has. This is huge.
Yeah, here's the difference between the Arena Warlock decks. Ragnaros the Fire Lord comes on the board and starts putting fr0zen on a 2-turn clock. Says you need to deal with this immediately. fr0zen has picked up the mulch, and now he can answer it, but let's see what the Auctioneer also provides into his hand, because fr0zen still had a very low life total, and we do know that there's Power Overwhelming, Soulfire, and Leroy Jenkins in ShtanUdachi's hand for 14 damage.
Yeah, crucially, just so much damage here still for ShtanUdachi. Even if he is able to remove Ragnaros, it's dealt 8 damage. And I wonder if we're going to see a Feral Rage to try and keep fr0zen alive.
Absolutely. I think he realizes, you know, even he doesn't look like he can kill off this Twilight Drake, so he needs to gain life. He's up to 20, which puts him slightly out of the range.
Yeah, there's 14 from the hand, 4 on the board right now available for ShtanUdachi, so he is very nearly able to just kill fr0zen on his next turn. And his 14 damage only uses 4 mana. Demon Wrath will not add to that.
He could Kazakus Potion to make up the difference here.
He's going for a 1?
Perhaps.
He's going for a 1. There's 3 damage. Yeah, that is exactly lethal, I believe, with the 3 damage Kazakus Potion.
Oh my goodness, he found it.
And he just looks for exactly what he needs. The pace at which Stan plays and just realizes, I just need to go for 3 points of damage off this Kazakus. Adds all the math up. It works out. Soulfire last, so he doesn't discard the potion, and that is going to be game 3 going to ShtanUdachi.
That is sick. He does it so fast. I was counting again just to make sure, but he knew it. He knew it by heart, and I think it just goes to show you the product of his hard work. He's put so much time, so many games, won so many ladder stars from his opponents.
And we saw that stat earlier about 11,000 arena wins played. That is the smaller of the numbers when he goes to his quest screen. His total wins between the 2 formats is over 45,000. I play a lot of Hearthstone, and I have something like 12,000 wins. Yeah. 45,000. That's just an incredible number, and it absolutely shows in not just the speed, but the preciseness that Shtan plays.
45,000 wins?
Yeah, wins.
So we
that's
haven't
not
even,
games,
well,
that's
he
wins.
apparently doesn't lose very much, but
Yeah.
even if you were generous and said, you know, 70, 80%, that's still, you know, 50, 60,000 wins there for the ranked play. Now, you look at fr0zen, you can see that he's very upset with not being able to survive 1 extra turn, because he was assembling the team. Aviana, Kuhn, Malygos, they were all going to be reunited, but wasn't given enough turns. And now we're going to go into game number 4 with a 2-1 advantage for ShtanUdachi. And more importantly, you know, ShtanUdachi has still some really powerful decks coming. He's got the Aggro Shaman, which is very problematic for Druid, and potentially the Arena Warlock as well. But at the same time, I do wonder about this one deck from Shtan, you know, Reno Mage. That is a deck that's been also underperforming this tournament.
It has, and we saw a lot of players switch to playing Freeze Mage, because Freeze Mage is a much stronger deck against in particular, Dragon Priest, which is what fr0zen is going with this game. And the Reno Mage, you know, can definitely struggle in quite a few matchups against Jade decks and such. But ShtanUdachi just feels super comfortable with it. We saw him dismantle opponents playing decks that were purportedly bad matchups over the course of the tournament with that deck. So, you know, much like his Reno Warlock deck, he just pilots it incredibly well and can find spots to win where others might not.
Game number 4. What could be the turning point for this series, or perhaps fr0zen can just reset it and send it to a best of 3. Still looking for a second win against Stan, and the 2 times he's matched up hasn't been able to get it just yet. He's going to start off with Dragon Priest with a pretty decent opening hand. He's got the ability to answer early game threats with a Shadow or Pain, and he's got that 1-drop, which is very crucial.
Yeah, the Twilight Whelp is absolutely crucial, as you mentioned, in this this matchup. Though he does pick up a Northshire Cleric, which is another option for him to play on the first turn. Northshire Cleric similarly answers these 2 minions, both 1 health. And then he does have the Shadowward Pain that he can follow up with to kill a Totem Golem, which is Stan's best play next turn. He's actually going to go with both of these minions, and I like this from fr0zen here, because he is anticipating the Totem Golem this turn. He expects that he's going to be using his second turn, playing Shadowward Pain, and he's going to be able to trade his 1 Whelp with the 2 Pirates, and now he's ahead on the board and has this minion established to pump up with his Cabal Talon Priest.
Ooh, Stan picks up another Totem Golem, and fr0zen does have a follow-up play, though. That is the Ball Talon Priest, the ideal minion to play on 3 and protect your cleric.
And a very good draw available for next turn. Finds the Defender of Argus. Whew, but that is a great draw from ShtanUdachi here too.
What is going on here?
Yeah, the Jade Claws from the top there allows him to clear off the Talon Priest and start getting to work on that cleric. So now fr0zen's actually in trouble. He was in a great spot, but the Totem Golem into Claws there does make things a little bit rougher. The Dragon coming down to protect fr0zen, though, very important.
Yeah,
Flame Tongue, though, all of a sudden again, Shtan can punch through.
If you didn't have the Azure Drake that he picked up, it would have been problematic. But now, this is kind of one of the things that fr0zen was prioritizing for a while. Was, you know, what happens if we both go, you know, trading rather evenly, and then I needed more card resources. I can really outvalue the Shaman very quickly, because remember, this is an aggro version of the Shaman. They don't have access to as much card draw through Mana-Tide Totems, for example.
Yeah, Shtan does have Azure Drake available in hand to potentially reload. But fr0zen here has kind of a tough decision, because he can dig for resources using his heal on his cleric. He can powered shield it as well if he wishes. If he did play his Azure Drake this turn, it would be his last dragon in hand, which would make lots of cards very difficult for him to get value out of, like that Wormrust Agent. That was the perfect draw for fr0zen. Now he can clear off the Blood Mage Thalanos if he chooses, heal his cleric to draw a card, and deploy a minion this turn.
Yeah, I like that a lot better than Defender of Argus, because it's clear that neither side has been able to establish a decisive lead at this point. And with Jackknife Operative being picked up, fr0zen looks like he's in firm control for the late game stages. Now Stan does have some good reload here. He's got Azure Drake, Feral Spirits are fantastic, get back onto the board if you're ahead, but doesn't look like he's got something very clean this turn.
Yeah, it's a bit awkward because the Feral Spirits do potentially just walk into fr0zen and be able to clear them with his minions. Azure Drake is always tough for Priest to deal with, though awkwardly, the fact that it is next to a Flame Tongue Totem exposes it to Shadow Word Death. So fr0zen could use his Shadow Word Death and then clear off the Flame Tongue Totem if he wants. He could also potentially use the Corruptor he just drew and trade in one of his smaller minions. It looks like he's going to play for value here. Oh, he's going with the Defender of Argus. Okay, this will allow him to clear it off and develop more to the board. And now both of his minions are bigger than the attack of the Azure Drake. And he does save the Shadow Word Death for a 4-mana 7/7, which is exactly what Shtan draws.
I like it. He knows that this type of aggro Shaman does not have access to Lightning Storm, so if his opponent weakens his own board by attacking into it, he can use Blackwing Corruptor to push for damage and get value off Defender of Argus while he has the chance, because as time goes on, you might have only one minion sticking to the board per turn.
Yeah, I think we'll see a Shadow Word Death perhaps this turn, simply because there is a 7/7 in play, and you really don't want to give that much value to it when you have the ability to set your opponent back. Unfortunately, he has no good play. Everything else costs 5 mana. So this is actually a pretty awkward spot for fr0zen in terms of just his ability to actually develop anything on the board. He can clear off the other 2 minions and heal his Wormrust Agent. All right, he's actually going to leave up the Flame Wreath Faceless and allow the Faceless to clear his Taunt minion. So this does give him a 5 mana and 3 mana play the next turn. So from a tempo perspective, this can be a lot stronger, but ooh, Jade Lightning picked up. That's going to swing the board very much towards Shtan.
Yeah, back and forth this game goes. Neither player able to 100% secure a board and snowball it. Although it's starting to pile up more and more because of the way things have worked out. This is the perfect turn that fr0zen was looking for. And this might be fr0zen's push to win the game. And look at Shaman, it's down to 13 health.
Yeah, Shtan has been using the Jade Claws to attack fr0zen's minions. fr0zen is at 29, and he is the deck which is essentially stronger the longer the game goes because he has more high-impact cards. Shtan's the aggro deck, and he's behind at this point, which is quite bad for him. But Maelstrom Portal...
I mean, if you need to get a totem, I think that was it. Being able to clear the Blackwing Corruptor, but
certainly
fr0zen is waiting on the other end with area effect cards. Chooses instead for the Operative, and now has found Lightning Bolt. I think he was
or
maybe...
a 4-mana 7/7.
Yeah, maybe the opportunity to find game-ending damage if he's able to tuck it behind his belt here. Or in his belt, rather, with Holy Nova and Lightning Bolt. That's only 5 direct damage. Where does the other 3 come from?
He does have Azure Drake, which can help support these, but this is just such a strong tempo play. He had 4 mana left over, and giving him a 7/7 is not bad.
Give them a taste of their own medicine, Brian.
Crucially, too, fr0zen has Azure Drake plus Holy Nova next turn, so those Feral Spirits are not going to protect ShtanUdachi's face at all. Shtan is going to have to just go kind of an all-out push here, use his burn perhaps to kill the 7/7, or it looks like he's killing the operative instead, and yeah, he's just not going to have the tools. Going to try to protect himself with these doggies, but Holy Nova plus spell damage will clear the way for his own betraying 7/7.
That's right.
Oh no, he's overloaded. He's overloaded.
Oh, you're right.
Never think of a priest being overloaded, but he will still attack him down to 1. I missed that part, but he's at 1, and there's a Holy Nova.
Clear.
He's still dead, just going to take another turn.
Doesn't really matter what Shtan draws here. Would have to have something crazy in his deck. That's going to be game 4 in the books. And fr0zen able to tie up the series. We're going to a best of 3, Brian.
Yeah, and I think crucially, fr0zen did get that priest win, which is potentially pretty important against Shtan's lineup. There is the Reno Mage, which would have been a great matchup. But perhaps more importantly, Shtan got the Reno Warlock win. And that was a lot of what fr0zen's lineup is trying to beat. You know, look at fr0zen's remaining decks. He has Reno Warlock of his own, and he has the Malagos Druid. Shtan still has that Aggro Shaman, which can definitely punish the slower Druid deck, as well as cause a lot of trouble for Reno Warlock. So it'll be interesting to see where fr0zen can find a win there. Perhaps he needs to have his Druid lineup against Shtan's Mage.
Reno Mage definitely the big question mark over my head, but at the same time, this Malagos Druid has had some middling results. It's been looking great in some games, and others it just falls flat on its face. fr0zen swears by it, though. It's his favorite deck, and it's gotten him this far. Let's see what happens in game number 5. It looks like we're going to Shaman versus the Reno Warlock, a pivotal game for fr0zen here, because at least prior to the nerf of Small-Time Buccaneer and Spirit Claws, Aggro Shaman was favored against Reno Warlock. I wonder how much it's changed since then, because I haven't actually played that much of this matchup. It's usually mid-range Shaman.
It is a lot easier to win as a Shaman than when your opponent had their Flame Imps and such they can essentially play. One of the big differences for most of the aggro Shamans was that they tended to remove the entire Pirate package. Shtan actually still has South Sea Deckhand and Patches, which makes his Flame Tongue totems a lot scarier. But speaking of scary, Doomsayer from fr0zen is the absolute best possible response he can have to a Totem Golem, and he is off to a very strong start in this game. Ooh, Twilight Drake picked up, gets on the board with a big minion when he's still at 27 life.
Yeah, massive pickup here from fr0zen. Otherwise, Kazakus was his only play. ShtanUdachi
You know it's bigger.
is not stopping for anything. He just drops the 7/7 and says, deal with it, and fr0zen can.
All right, he is taking a 5-minute spell. Mystic Wool gives him potentially the ability to polymorph the 7/7. If he so chose. He went pretty quickly with those selections, so we'll try and get eyes on exactly what that potion does. It is polymorph, summon a 5/5. So we'll see if Shtan decides if he's going to go face here. He does have the tools to kill a lot of things. We see the Pirate Star coming out. He could just play for board control here, given that there is... yeah, he has the ability to clear off the Kazakus with his weapon. So now there's no guaranteed polymorph from that potion. fr0zen would have to go for the 50-50, attacking into one of the smaller minions and then firing off the Kazakus potion to try to stop the Flame Wraith Faceless. He could play a second-rate Bruiser to try to get something in the way. He could just trade off his Drake and Hellfire, but that does a lot to damage himself as well.
Yeah, not to mention that your hand still looks a little awkward with how you're going to play the following turns. You have to plan an escape route. You know, you have to figure out what's a way for me to get onto the board and destroy whatever he plays, because you know that your opponent's coming up on what looks like to be 5 mana. So if they play Azure Drake, what are you going to be doing in that situation now that you don't have things like Shadow Bolt? And fr0zen doesn't even have Reno, or any Refreshment Vendor, or a Farseer. So every single point of damage really hurts here.
Yeah, and that's got to be weighing on his mind in terms of whether he wants to try to fit a life tap in, playing the taunt minion and getting a bit closer to maybe finding Reno. Reno is so crucial to being able to survive the long-term direct damage output of the Shaman deck that if he can't find it, he's in a lot of trouble. And the rope's burning. Doesn't have much time. He's going for the 50-50.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, the 1-1 becomes a 1-1.
Can't win them all.
And that's disastrous. This is just lethal damage.
I
There's
think
7,
so,
8.
yeah.
Yeah, he has 12, 13, 14. It is, in fact, lethal with the Flame Tongue plus Lava Burst here. And ShtanUdachi is going to be 1 game away from the championship.
And record time, ShtanUdachi not stopping for a beat, as he is going to go up 3-2 over the Reno Warlock and is on championship point.
And we mentioned the kind of quirky deck that ShtanUdachi is playing in his lineup that many players did not bring is this Reno Mage. It's his last deck he needs to get through. This is a deck that's kind of underperformed. This is a deck that a lot of players chose to swap out of their lineups. If they wanted to play Mage, many players chose to bring Freeze Mage instead. And now he's going to have to find a win against the combo Druid and this Reno Lock, or this Reno Lock.
Well, you know, Reno Mage definitely can also beat any deck. It's one of the, it's a Swiss Army knife, so to speak, of decks. So we'll see if ShtanUdachi is able to follow up on that. You can see that fr0zen really distressed when he saw that he had to go for this polymorph onto the 7/7, and you know, I don't think it was a bad idea. I think he realized that this is a chance to blow out my opponent because my hand just looked really weak. You know, Emperor Thor's hand doesn't stop your opponent from hitting the face with minions. Spellbreaker, what's that gonna do? Silence a Flame Tongue Totem after he's already punished you? It's not gonna do anything. So he had to go for a very risky spot to try and win the game and stop that Flaming Faces from attacking.
Well, we are about to get ready into what could be the final game of the championship. fr0zen with the combo Druid. And this is the kind of deck it's built to beat. Reno Mage does have more resilience to the combo than, say, Reno Warlock does, because the priest, or priest, not priest, no priest here, it's a mage. The mage has access to Ice Block, which can crucially, as we see in Stan's opening hand, can crucially protect the mage from that one-turn combo damage. Counterspell, too. We saw in this tournament, fr0zen got his Nourish countered by a counterspell off of, I believe it was another Babbling Book. And he's a player who could run that Nourish out into that counterspell just thinking, well, the odds are it's not that. The odds are it's not something that can actually disrupt my card.
Well, fr0zen seems like he's been in the clutch a lot this tournament, going 7-1 whenever he's facing elimination. ShtanUdachi, Coin Arcane Intellect, just needs to improve his hand that badly, as it's filled with a lot of situational cards. fr0zen doesn't get any ramp though, so that's definitely a big added bonus for Shtan. You know, keep in mind that this Reno Mage also can just lose to board pressure.
And this is critical. The counterspell comes down for ShtanUdachi here. fr0zen's another the coin. He just picked up an Innervate though. He could aim to Innervate and potentially play a Nourish this turn. If he plays Innervate, the Innervate will be countered and he'll still have access to Nourish next turn. He may just play Fandral and hope to play the Nourish next turn. Nourish with Fandral is incredibly strong, but that could run right into that counterspell.
And this is going to test whether or not fr0zen is on point with his hand tracking. He should know that's a Babbling Book spell if he's able to keep track of it. I've been looking at him, he's been looking away from the monitor a lot, and that's usually a sign of thinking about something else. Is he too distracted? Or is he going to relive that moment again where Nourish gets blocked by the counterspell?
This is an absolutely crucial juncture here.
Now he's got to decide. He's thinking it over. What was that the spell from the Babbling Book? Or is it just an Ice Block? Or is it something else that I'm not considering here?
Yeah, the only secret in ShtanUdachi's deck is Ice Block.
It's true, but you know, so sometimes really deep in a tournament, you might lose track of decks depending on how it is. fr0zen's been also coming off of a series he just won against Docpone, so you have to make sure just to go over every single possibility and all of the preparation that you did.
Yeah, fr0zen is a player who talks a lot about hand reading and how important it is to pay attention to the order of cards in your opponent's hand, to be able to get information about what's in their mulligan. He innervates
it!
He plays around the counterspell!
Gets the Nourish, and a huge sigh of relief here comes out for fr0zen as he knows he dodged a big bullet there. That Nourish was paramount to his success.
That was absolutely crucial. fr0zen must have been thinking back to that first match where he got his Nourish countered. He's like, not like this, not again.
And you know what? He got that Innervate back. Nourish paid it back as fr0zen is able to draw pretty deep into his deck, and I guess right now his Fandral is also still uncontested. That's one of the things that he was really hoping for the previous turn. fr0zen just going over the calculations of whether or not it's worth removing versus keeping fr0zen. fr0zen's second value play behind this is another Nourish, but his hand would also be too big, so he's just trying to figure out everything from this spot. Burly Bully, one of the most annoying cards to deal with, a card that I personally like a lot.
Yeah, this is a very powerful card against fr0zen's decks. fr0zen's deck is incredibly spell heavy. We look at his hand, there are 2 minions and the rest are spells. It's a 10-10.
That's an uprooted and rooted Ancient of War.
This is a philosophy question. How can you be both uprooted and rooted? It just does not make any sense.
Oh, fr0zen Staghelm finds a way. And ShtanUdachi needs to find a way to deal with it, but he can't really. fr0zen just loves 10-10 minions.
Who
Can't
doesn't?
really describe it.
I mean, who doesn't?
9 mana available to him, 9 cards in his hand. fr0zen looking for a way to pressure. Now, he knows that this is second secret. There's no possible way that there's another random card being generated. Therefore, this has to be the ice block. Can also play the removal game and try to see if he can stack his hand with even more draw or pressure, but it looks like he's stuck with a couple situational things going on here.
He's going to go ahead and use the Feral Rage. The Feral Rage is not affected by spell damage, like his swipes and such, for later turns in the game with Malygos, so he decides he's going to use that. He does give a coin to ShtanUdachi. That is very powerful in Shtan's deck, largely because of Archmage Antonidas, as well as the ability to power out a card like Alexstrasza. Crucially, too, that Feral Rage is one of the ways that fr0zen can protect himself against burn damage, which is Shtan's primary road to victory, especially in a game like this where he's behind. And he's very far behind. That's a 10-10 still hitting him.
Yeah, and Reno Mage does struggle in the face of way too many stats onto the board. When there's a lot of health, and especially if the minions are putting you on a clock, Reno Mage does tend to flounder a little bit. That is another big thing about what about the Kazakus already being played, is the fact that ShtanUdachi doesn't have a way to remove a mass board. So even if fr0zen goes down here in his board and loses all of his burst, what if he just goes for a big, Malygos Aviana Kun turn and tries to win that way?
Well, that may be what we're looking at, and Rotten Torch does take down the other Drake. And there's still a gigantic tree on the board. fr0zen can pop this ice block right now.
He's going to try to pop it with the least amount of resources invested. And, it seems like Azure Drake, which replaces itself, is a good start. You have Blood Mage Thalnos to help piece together a massive amount of damage with any kind of spells.
And crucially, if Shtan is committed to playing Reno next turn, he only has 2 mana left over to deal with this Ancient. He will swipe, breaks the ice block, and clears off the Azure Drake. This is a very tough situation for Shtan to come back from.
Does end up using the Raven Idol card, so Shtan doesn't have to worry about that anymore. He does have a Polymorph finally, but his Reno Jackson is the only play that keeps him alive, guaranteed in his mind. But, I mean, you're starting with half life. Your opponent still has 14 damage on the board with let's count how much. Living Roots, Moonfire with Blood Mage. So
that's 5.
An additional 5.
Plus 6, including the hero power. I think we're probably going to see, and then he has 3 more if he can weave it in with, or rather 4 more with the Feral Rage. So that's, I think it's 14. Oh wait, I'm actually counting wrong. I'm not even counting the Azure Drake. Yeah, there's the Blood Mage, so each of those are plus 2. So it's 4, 7, 11, plus his board, and it can be fit in the hero power as well. I don't think so.
Yeah,
5, 6.
few points short. I mean, his board's at 30. It'd be ridiculous.
But regardless, Ice Block is gone. Ice Block is gone, and now, there's Aviana. Still no Malygos, still no Kun. But he has a lot of time. fr0zen's at 28 life. And he is in absolute command of this board and has this enormous hand.
I just gotta say, this is the longest I've ever seen Ancient of War have 10 attack and just
the game not be over.
This is ridiculous.
Well, usually if he has 10 attack for a long time, he has much less health and he dies, but...
Yeah, with no ice block, too, ShtanUdachi doesn't even have the Hail Mary play available to him of trying to go for Alexstrasza and burn down the Druid. This is looking really grim for game number 6. Crowd favorite not going to help. Although it might make ShtanUdachi feel very validated.
When you play an attack with it, you have lethal, right? That's what it says?
Oh, right. Well, I was just thinking maybe the Innkeeper's trying to tell you, don't worry, Shtan, you're a big crowd favorite. People like it.
3 summons here with the Kazakus Potion. None of those stop at 10-10. I think it's a 10-8 for now, but it's still 10-10 in my heart.
Well, you know,
Frostnova can stop.
Frostnova stops it, but I'm actually counting the damage in Frozen's hand, and if this Agidrake survives, then that would be it. And I think this might stop it because there's not enough, maybe not enough mana to do everything now. I think Frozen's going to count. He might actually be able to get there. He's got the swipe.
Oh, there's Aviana Kun.
Oh, he's got Kun.
But there's no Malagos. He can Aviana Kun. That just puts stats in play. But there is no Malagos available to unlock the rest of his mana, so he doesn't get, or rather to give spell damage in addition to unlocking the rest of his mana.
So he's got 2 from the Moonfires, 4 from the Living Roots, 8 with the Feral Rages, and then you add 4 from the Swipe, that's 12, and then you add 4 damage from Thanos. Is that it?
Well, it might be enough. Aviana Kun actually reduces the cost of Blood Mage to 1. It looks like Frozen is counting better than we are.
I think he's got it. And this time he better be dang sure, because there's no room for error. But I think he's got it. I think he's got the calculations down. Doesn't matter if his opponent draws all the coins in the world if he's dead. He's actually going to draw too many coins, Brian.
He is. He can take those with him to the grave. He'll be buried with those coins as the Feral Rage will come in for the final 4 points of damage.
There it
and
is.
send us to the final game, game number 7 of the Winter Championship.
fr0zen ties it up. It all comes down to one final matchup. Strike Druid off the board. ShtanUdachi just has to win with the Reno Mage. Did have a little bit of an awkward draw. Starting off with just a book and Arcane Intellect, but picking up way too many heavy cards. And fr0zen hit the ideal setup. Fandral plus Nourish, just going to show you why that combo is so devastating.
Yeah, and now we are just down to 2 Reno wins. It'll be Reno Warlock for fr0zen and Reno Mage for ShtanUdachi. This is a matchup that's super interesting. There's tons of kind of stages of the game where each player needs to respect certain threats the other player can generate. Once we get into it, we'll see exactly how it pans out, but the burn version of Reno Mage that ShtanUdachi is playing is particularly strong in this matchup because the Reno Warlock uses their life total as a resource with life tap. And you can have this dance where you can essentially force your opponent to play Reno or risk dying to your maximum damage combination. Because ShtanUdachi even has Pyroblast in his deck to discount with Inkmaster Salia and generate huge damage turns.
Game number 7, it's all on the line. Win this game and you're the champion. fr0zen versus ShtanUdachi, Reno Mage versus Reno Warlock, and the final send-off of Mean Streets of Gadgetzan and the Year of the Kraken. Would you want it any other way, Brian?
Not at all. I love Reno. I'm glad he's going to be gone, but I love Reno. And this will be an absolute send-off for everyone's favorite treasure seeker. Who is he? Who will he bring the treasure to? Will it be Shtan or fr0zen? Babbling Book picks up an Arcane Missiles. Not so hot in this matchup, but it can do some damage.
Yeah, we'll see if it ends up squeezing in a big tempo play for ShtanUdachi, who's looking like he's just going to go for some early game board presence and card draw, but rather nominal. Knows that fr0zen is looking for big opportunities to get onto the board fast. Imp Gang Boss gets challenged by Arcane Blast and
or just that torch off the top.
Oh.
And this will allow ShtanUdachi to get in some incremental damage here. And this is very important because the Reno Mage wants to put pressure on the Warlock as the Warlock uses their life total as a resource. And every point of damage matters. Every time you attack with a 1-1, every time you ping them, gets them closer to those critical junctures where they are under that pressure. Bran Bronzebeard comes down for Shtan. He has Kazakus in his hand. fr0zen currently has no answer.
Not yet. But Mortal Coil will dig for Shadow Bolts for something. No answer. Bran Bronzebeard is going to be able to get 2 Kazakus potions. And that is going to be a huge swing opportunity for ShtanUdachi in this game. Do you just pick 2 10s? Do you pick a 5 to balance it out?
It feels like Shtan is pressuring fr0zen here. I think he wants to go for 5s. I don't think he needs the long game ultra value. He doesn't have Inkmaster Salia in his hand, so there's no reason to kind of take the Hail Mary of making a gigantic effect. The 5 first, I didn't quite catch what he took. Now this is the interesting part. He takes an AoE resummon, going for a 5 again. And we see, I saw make a 5/5. I think he may take also resummon 2. Yeah, so he went for 1 half reactive, half build a board, and 1 fully build a board in terms of his potion choices. So lots of powerful tools available for ShtanUdachi here. And I think we might see potentially even the AoE happen right now.
Yeah, this is some fireworks coming out for the game, as ShtanUdachi does have ways to answer the board. And with Azure Drake, it is interesting of how he wants to utilize his mana here, because he can Azure Drake, Arcane Blast, and have the ability for Arcane Missiles, but yeah, there's a chance that it misses everything and
it could
the
be a
Emperor
disaster.
survives.
He does have his Bran on the board, so Bran could potentially trade into something. Bran attack into Emperor, AoE for 4, resummon 2 is a potential option that will clear the board and build him something back. Bran could be among those, but there's also the Azure Drake does have a lot of appeal here as well. He is going to coin out, play Azure Drake. It will draw him 2 cards. He's coining first so he doesn't overflow his hand.
That's right. Yeah, and it looks like Shtan just going to go see if he can remove this Emperor with Arcane Missiles.
He's got 3 shots, so he's a big favorite. 4 shots, rather, sorry, with the spell damage here. He's a big favorite to clear this Emperor, and...
No way!
Oh, it does it.
Yeah, it was just a really scary moment there for ShtanUdachi, and fr0zen still unable to remove this Bran, which has collected a ton of value. With no sign of stopping, fr0zen, once again, just going to let it live and just build up a big board.
And these are the kind of turns that fr0zen needs in this matchup. He needs to make big threats with high health, because the mage does not deal particularly well with high health minions. Only have access to a single copy of Polymorph. Most of the removal is damage based. This is 18 health swung across 2 bodies. This is very important turn for fr0zen to see if Shtan can answer.
Shtan does have his own variety of ways to answer. At worst, he can just stall the board with Blizzard and just pass and see if he can get something better else for the following turns.
He does have the Ice Lance he can use to remove one of these now, which looks like he may be going for it while he has the minions frozen. He will not. So just wants to attack in his Bran, because his Bran is extremely vulnerable at that stage. It only has 1 health. Doesn't want to leave it open to a possible AoE effect like Demon Wrath or, crucially, Mortal Coil.
Yeah, well, Ice Lance is really important for extending the range, so I don't like using it there, so Stan holds on to it. The attack here also really scares fr0zen into thinking that there might be Flame Strike or some other opportunity that fr0zen is going to have bad development. Also weakens his own board if he wants to develop something along the lines of Abyssal Enforcer. So this was actually a pretty clever play from ShtanUdachi, just that subtle trade, which just makes fr0zen think, why would you trade your own Bran, especially if fr0zen already used Mortal Coil?
Yeah, and fr0zen builds a gigantic board, another 5/7 taunt here. Shtan has the AoE with the Kazakus potion that he can use. It will be 4 damage if the Azure Drake dies first, or 5 damage if he doesn't attack with it. He's going for the 4 damage to everything. Clears off one of the 5/7s.
Oh, that hurts. Okay, but he's still got Azure Drake.
He does get the Azure Drake back, so...
Yeah. He was really hoping for just not the Babbling Book. He's got a pretty decent pool. Bran, Kazakus, even Thanos coming back wouldn't be bad.
And fr0zen now, he's digging for more resources with Life Tap first. Leroy comes into the hand. He already has Power of Willing discounted.
He uses Face as Manipulator, though, in order to build
true.
a big board presence, and as a result, his combo potential has significantly dropped. But still nice to at least have that Leroy as a possibility for damage.
And look at Shtan's hand. Shtan's hand is full of burst damage. He has Roaring Torch already. He has Pyroblast already. And now fr0zen, I think, is feeling the pressure. fr0zen recognizes that he is in a rough position here and needs to pressure, but this is a power turn from Shtan here. Emperor comes down, Ice Block comes down. That burst damage in fr0zen's hand will mean nothing, and that burst damage in Shtan's hand is getting mighty scary with this discount.
Absolutely. He has seen the Babbling Book card, so he knows that it's not going to be one of those spells, but right now he's going to be setting himself down to 14.
Pyroblast is discounted, but Pyroblast is not enough.
That is so close. The Kazakus potion here, it doesn't do any damage, correct?
The Kazakus potion here is resummon 2 and make a 5/5 he has remaining. If Shtan can find Inkmaster Salia, he has access to the burn combo of Pyroblast plus Roaring Torch.
And all this pressure that Shtan's been able to generate early on is now starting to add up, because fr0zen doesn't have Reno, so every life tap is even more painful, because you know that you could die. And he is aware of the Pyroblast, which ShtanUdachi's trying to find the right time to use.
But fr0zen now, he has significant pressure. He has 9 power worth of minions in play, and while Shtan has Ice Block up, he doesn't want to fall too far behind on the board. Looks like he's going with the Kazakus potion this turn. Keeps debating.
I think he's also maybe wondering if what fr0zen can be doing too. He's summoning a 5/5 and 2 friendly minions that died. High chance for a book to come back. It's the same crew once again.
One really interesting thing here is if he were to play Burgly Bully and get a coin, Roaring Torch plus Pyroblast with discount will be able to be played in the same turn, but not anymore. Uses the Roaring Torch as removal.
He's afraid of what fr0zen was doing. He's playing a mind control tech for tempo on the board. It has to be a setup for something. It's a respect play.
Ooh, there's Reno, though.
fr0zen picks up the Reno Jackson.
And now fr0zen does have access to potentially a trade with his mind control tech into Hellfire plus Reno, or just, is he going to Twisting Nether? Okay.
Twisting Nether and feeling like he's safe.
Well, he just looked up at Shtan. I think he realizes that if Shtan has Pyroblast plus Frostbolt, he's just dead, but it's not there. Antonidas, though, that can extend the range a lot. Burgly Bully, coins are very valuable now that Antonidas is in the hand.
Now fr0zen has to make a decision of if he's going to play Reno Jackson because he knows the threat of Alexstrasza is extremely real here. And if his opponent has Alexstrasza, puts him down to 10. I think that might be the checkmate. Doesn't have much room for error, but he plays Reno because he knows he has to hope that Stan, out of the 21 cards that he's drawn, doesn't have Alexstrasza.
And right now, Shtan does not. Oh, that Frostbolt, if it had been in the hand earlier, that would have been lethal just last turn.
Well, assuming he has the mana to play everything, but...
Well, his discount was my point. But anyway, our Archmage Antonidas represents a huge possible threat here, though there is still that Doomsayer here that can really complicate things. Shtan wants to get damage in, but wants to keep his board here.
And I think Shtan weighing if he wants to remove the Doomsayer, or just maybe draw first and see what happens.
It's an interesting spot for sure, because there are a lot of options. Gonna go ahead and polymorph Reno and just protect this board. He just wants to go ahead and kill Doomsayer, leave his Burgly Bully on board. He recognizes that the coins that Burgly Bully can give him are extremely powerful with Archmage Antonidas in his hand, especially alongside the Ice Lance, Frostbolt, Pyroblast. So much burn already.
Yeah, and with Polymorph being used, fr0zen has successfully baited that out. And now Sylvanas, very annoying for ShtanUdachi to deal with.
Alexstrasza is drawn.
Alexstrasza has been drawn.
And there's Ice Block in play, Reno in hand.
And able to set him down to 11 health. This is the 2-turn lethal.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way out of this for fr0zen. He's already used Reno Jackson. He can steal a minion here, but he cannot go high enough in life to survive Shtan's next turn.
Is there any way, looking at fr0zen's deck, let's just even have Cabal Courier or something else that can help bail him out of this situation? It doesn't look like it.
I am not seeing it. Power overwhelming. He can clear off the Bully.
Yeah, he's going to try to clear off most of the board. He's going to go to Jiraxxus at 15 life. But that doesn't solve enough here. ShtanUdachi's got 13 burn just on the follow-up. And he can set him down to 1 health. He's also got the coin, so he can actually use everything here.
Yeah, Pyroblast plus coin, plus Frostbolt, plus Ice Lance. ShtanUdachi finds the burn, and he will be the 2017 Hearthstone Winter Champion.
Congratulations to ShtanUdachi. He has come through a long journey, multiple years trying to qualify through the Championship Tour. And he is your global champion. Europe stays on top, Brian.
Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
Congratulations, man. Congratulations.
So much. A lot of people. Oh, yeah.
Congratulations! Congratulations! Oh my goodness, ShtanUdachi, you have tried so hard. You've gotten so far. You have been in this game for so long, and now you have finally secured your championship. What does this mean to you, and what are you feeling right now?
Очень сложно описать чувство, это очень круто, очень круто. Шел к этому 3 года, и наконец-таки удалось этого добиться.
It's really hard to describe my feelings right now. I've been going for this for 3 years. I'm really excited right now.
Well, you have a fire burning inside you, and that is not just the fire of passion for Hearthstone. You have a raging fever right now. You have overcome so much to be here. Tell me about how it took you to get here on this stage today and what it means to you to look at all this crowd and to be their champion.
Пока еще сложно осознать вообще, что я выиграл вообще, я пока еще сам, наверное, не понимаю. Но было очень круто представлять Европу. Это даже вроде как ничего матч уже не значил, потому что мы на BlizzCon только призовые, но помимо всего прочего ты еще представлял весь европейский регион против Америки. И кто сильнее, это тоже важно для многих. Многие болели, и это тоже очень-очень важно было.
It's really hard for me to realize that I've actually won this tournament right now, but I'm really glad that I was representing the Europe region. That was very important for me, and it was really important for my fans.
Tell me your emotions and tell me what you want the fans to know about you.
Будем продолжать в том же духе. Попробуем выиграть еще и на следующем чемпионате, даже попасть на него. Почему бы и нет. И, соответственно, будем готовиться весь год к BlizzCon и там тоже попытаться взять первое место, пойти по пути Павла, так сказать. Sorry.
It's very important for my fans. I will keep going. I will keep playing in the following tournaments and at BlizzCon, and I will obviously try to win at BlizzCon and follow Pavel's footsteps.
Well, ShtanUdachi, every champion needs a trophy, and we have Mike Donay with your trophy right now. He is the Hearthstone senior game designer. He has put his love and passion into this game, and I'm sure he is happy to recognize you as his champion.
Congratulations, you did great work out there.
Thank you.
Well done.